Okay, this is Kevin Osborne at baldwisdom.com, and I'm going to do a quick design exercise to show you how to create a nameplate using Inkscape and OpenSCAD that you can then 3D print in about 2 minutes on whatever 3D printer you happen to have. I've tried this on PrinterBot and also on Ultimaker. So the first thing to do is to create an Inkscape document and make sure that your document properties are in millimeters, because everything in the 3D printing world is in millimeters, and this will allow us to make sure that we maintain the right size, because sometimes when you convert back and forth between these file formats, they change the units on you, so and then your thing can get bigger or smaller. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to create text, and I'm using Sergo UI, which is kind of a blocky thing. If you wanted to print it bigger, you could use something more filigreed, but since the purpose of this is to print something fast, we're going to use something that will work well at a small size. So we're going to print about 1 inch, 72 points high. Kevin. Now, first thing I have to do is we have to convert this. It's an object. You can't edit it individually into a path. So we say object to path. And then once we do that, we can take this path editing tool and we can edit the individual paths. Now, these paths aren't polygons. They are paths that contain things like splines and curves and arcs and things like that. So you can see I can drag this out and make kind of a curvy thing. But OpenSCAD doesn't really understand those, so I'm going to undo that. And I need to convert these into straight lines. Now, anytime you do these path operations, you'll see the gray selected dots. Those are not really selected. So if we want to actually do something to those paths, we have to actually select them. So we can drag a rectangle around the area that we want to select, and we can select them. Now, if we do this right now and convert it to make selected segments lines, it's going to make our E a little chunky, and that's okay. You might want to do that. It might be the look that you're going for, but we're going to try to make it nice and smooth. So the way we do that is, once again, we select it, and actually we'll select all of them like this. And then we're going to add more points. And what this add insert new nodes into selected segments does is it will add nodes in between all the points that are there. And so you can make your curves made up of more small lines rather than fewer small lines. So first we have to select all the points, and then we're going to add. Just do it a couple times is probably good enough. And then we convert into selected segments lines. So now those are all individual lines. If I will drag one of these out for you. You can see now it's not a curve anymore. It's just a straight line. So that becomes a triangle. So we'll undo that, and now we have a nice set of polygons, really. And actually, at this point, you could export this and then put it on top of a block for printing. But if you printed this by itself, the letters would be individual, and you'd have, instead of a nameplate, you'd have letters that people could then rearrange. If you wanted, you could do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to sort of move them so that they are joined together, so that they print together. So to do that, we get out of this mode here, go back into select mode. We need to select the individual letters, and then you have to. This is tricky because in path edit mode you can't move this. So now, but we can only select it in path edit mode. So now we move it by hitting the select and transform objects, and then we can use the keyboard to move it over straight across, or you can use the mouse if you want to do more creative positioning. Go back to path edit mode, select the next one, go to move mode, move the V over. The I is a little tricky because it has a floating dot above it, and if we just move that over, the dot's going to fall off, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a little creative typography here by moving it down so that it's touching the previous and next letters. So, and we're going to do that same thing for the N as well. So let's do that. Move that over. So now we have that. So now we have it all, but if you go into the path edit mode and select all the letters with the shift you'll see it's very complicated and it's a lot of individual paths. And if you export this right now into OpenSCAD, you'll have pieces missing because it doesn't quite know the right order to interpret the polygons. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all those points again, and then we're going to do a path union, which was going to basically take all the paths and eliminate any points that are inside other areas. So it makes a nice simple path. So now we have a nice path for exporting. Now, once again, we could export this right now, but when we render it in OpenSCAD, it'll be off to the side. And it's just a little bit of an inconvenience. Sometimes when you're working with these vector conversions, you'll be rendering something and you don't see it, and you have to sort of hunt around for it. So we're going to put it down at 0, 0 so that it'll render right in the center of our OpenSCAD window. And you can move that down by hand, or the easiest way to get it exactly right is to click in these X and Y boxes here and type 0. There, I moved it over to X0 and Y0. Okay. Now we export this as a actually it's just a save as. We save it as a kevin.svg, or whatever the name you want to give it. Oh, not SVG, I'm sorry. We want to make it a DXF. SVGs won't work. So that DXF, make sure your base units are millimeters, and we're good. Okay, now go into OpenSCAD. And the first thing we have to do is it only finds these files in the directory where the SCAD document is, and we don't have a saved SCAD document. So we can type our SCAD document, but it won't do anything. Import, we could say, I'm sorry, linear extrude. And then we say height equals 2 millimeters is a good one for a quick print. If you want to make something blockier, you could make it blockier, but and if you have time, that's great, but we're going for something that's quick to print. And then we say import kevin.dxf. And then semicolon, always. And then we want to save this in our in the same directory as where our DXF file is. So we're going to call this Kevin. Or you could use the same file. You could call it nameplate and then just edit out what the file name for the DXF file is if you were doing this for a number of people. All right. So now if we hit F6, it'll generate our 3D object. If you do, if you've never used OpenSCAD, there's also compile, which is a little quicker sometimes, but it actually doesn't generate all of the information that's needed to export a 3D object as an STL, which is what you need for a 3D printer. So, if you find that you can't find the object, then make sure you do F6. So that should do it for you. And if nothing shows up or chunks show up, it means that you still have curves in your file, and so you need to make sure that you change all the segments to lines. Okay, so now we'll just export it as an STL, and I'm going to call it the same name again, and that gives us an STL that then we can then import into our 3D printing software. For example, I use lately I've been using Cura.